Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. So I'd like to introduce today Tim Griffith. He is the creator of Pictodicta, the world's best platform for learning Latin effectively and permanently. I believe someone said that. But it is I'll let him talk more about the platform itself. He's also the Fellow of Classical Languages at New St. Andrews College and a good friend. So I'm going to go ahead and disable my camera here. I will be available in the comments. Please ask your questions there, and we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks so much, Tim.
Well, thank you for joining us. I hope that my talk here is going to be profitable to you. I know that many of you all are getting into online education, perhaps for the first time, and I really have as well. Although I've developed a lot of tools with Pictodicta courses that are online tools, all of my live teaching, or not all of it, but most of it has been face-to-face. And so I've really found myself in a similar position where confronted with this new reality where we're having to do all of our education online, of trying to figure out how to do some of the things that have worked so well in the classroom and figure out how to do them online. And so today I'll just be sharing with you all some of the things that I've figured out, particularly how to run an online workshop. So when teaching, you can have different kinds of live classes. You can have a lecture style where the teacher everything is centered around the teacher. All the students are listening. The teacher is going on and on and on about something, and they're all busily taking notes. And that kind of format works really well online because you just have one person being piped in and everyone's sitting there and listening. So as far as the technology, that's not a big obstacle. The trouble is that I don't really use lecture. And I see some of my former students in the group here. They all know that I hate lecturing. So that's something that that's not a method that I really like to use. And when moving online, that's something that I can't rely on. Another way to do it would be something like a seminar. And a seminar is where you have a small group where you kind of have equal discussions. And so it's sort of like a recitation. You might have 8 or 10 people who've all read a reading, and you kind of go around the room and discuss it. And with the wonderful innovation of Zoom, that's actually made seminars work really well online as well. The way that it just automatically kind of moves around. I do, when I teach live classes, use seminars, a seminar style, but only for my upperclassmen, for sophomores and juniors. For my freshmen, I use kind of a third style of teaching that I describe as a workshop. And when actually a few years ago, it feels like a few years ago, a few weeks ago, Daniel and I were having this discussion about how to teach languages online. And I said, I just don't know how you could do a workshop, a language workshop in an online format. And we kind of went back and forth on this, and he had some suggestions. And it was fortuitous that I had been thinking about this for a few weeks before suddenly, we got word that we all had to become online teachers. And so the workshop is what I really want to talk about today, and how that can happen online. But before I get to that, I want to just explain why the workshop and what I mean by it. Language and what I would, in general, humanities skills. Okay, so skill-based courses. Okay, that could include any foreign language, classical languages, but it also includes English grammar, writing, speaking, rhetoric, any of those sorts of things. They're skill-based skill-based subjects, unlike something like history or geography, where you're mostly learning information. And in skill-based courses, you're trying to learn something. I've always believed that sports and athletics are the best place to look as an example for a teaching model for how to teach skills. And I think that that is what our country kind of cares the most about and has actually gotten really good at teaching. And so for years and years, I've always looked at the methodology and the pedagogy of coaches and try to apply it to teaching Latin and language, which is my subject. And if you think of it like a soccer practice, a soccer practice is remarkable in that there's very little instruction that is given to the players. If you've got a practice of maybe 2 hours, you might spend 10 minutes or maybe 20 minutes explaining to the players principles and demonstrating certain moves to the students. Now, or not students, to the players. The majority of that time, 90% of that practice is spent doing practice, supervised practice, and that's this is what I'm kind of calling a workshop. It's an environment in which you have supervised practice, and it has a number of advantages. One, the level of engagement is just really, really high. If you compare the level of engagement in a soccer practice to the level of engagement in maybe a lecture class, you'll find that nobody ever passes notes and throws spitballs at each other during soccer practice. And the reason why is simply because they're busy doing something. They're actually performing work, and so they're very, very engaged just by nature. There's nothing super profound about it, but you just have them all working. The second thing that I think makes this kind of workshop so effective is that it's what I would call soft evaluation. Okay, so you don't have a coach walking around the practice with a clipboard keeping stats on everybody as they're practicing their basic moves. Okay, maybe they're all taking a shot on the goal, or they're dribbling, or they're going through cones or something like that. You don't have somebody recording and saying, you missed that one. Oh, good, you got that one, but you kind of shanked it and you just got lucky. This, I think, is really, really important. This soft evaluation provides an opportunity for a coach to give correction, but doesn't actually create an inhibition to learn among the players as they're acquiring new skills. And so when someone's acquiring a new skill and they feel like they're being evaluated and someone's keeping track of everything they're doing, they get nervous and they become unwilling to take risks. And when you're unwilling to take a risk, you're actually not going to develop very good skill in whatever it is you're working with. So if it's something like soccer and you're trying to learn how to do that, if you don't feel free to make mistakes and to try a new move, you're actually not going to develop in the way that you should. And so those two things, I think, are the reason why a sports practice is just so effective at building skills. High level of engagement, and yet there's soft evaluation. So you have the presence of correction. The coach is going around and saying, nope, you need to move, put your knee here, not there. You need to make sure you're leaning over the ball. You need to make sure you're doing this and not that. But at the same time, the players actually feel safe in taking risks. They don't mind the fact that they might miss a ball. uh, and lose it or mess up, because it's a skill. They're acquiring the skills and they're expected to do that. So anyway, this is the model that I've always attempted to emulate in my classroom workshop. To have a place where students were highly engaged in using material, but that had supervision, but don't feel like they're being evaluated, and evaluated in a strict way. So, and there are a couple of reasons why not to evaluate. I just mentioned some of them, but another reason is when you evaluate students at every possible moment, you create this enormous body of homework that you actually have to assess. And ultimately, it's almost impossible, especially in a language or a grammar class, to keep up on this giant pile of work, as many of you know only too well. So when I do a classroom workshop, which is the way that I spend probably 3/4 of my class time, of my lifetime with my students. I base my workshops around creating examples. So I ask my students to give examples of particular vocabulary words used in context, and or to use certain constructions. Okay, so I might say, I'd like you to use the word denique in a sentence, or I might say, I want you to use the pluperfect passive in a sentence in Latin. And to get them all engaged at once, if I were just to ask the class that, I would get one person who would respond. But if you ask the entire class that, and you have them all write on personal whiteboards, now instead of having one person engaged, you have the entire class engaged. So they're all working and writing out their sentences. And this allows the teacher to kind of walk around and comment and make observations, corrections, exhortations to individual students as they go. Every once in a while, you kind of stop the discussion and say, hey, look, everyone look at this example. This is going to apply to all of you. See what happened here? This can happen to any of you all. So you might kind of break out every once in a while. But that's typically how I would do something. Everyone's got their own little whiteboard. They're all writing. I also like to give a long list of things that they're working through. And this allows the quick ones to actually proceed through the material. And they're just, I approve one example and they move on to the next one. And they might get through 8 or 9. And yet a slower student may only get through 3 examples. And that's okay. This is partly where some of that soft grading comes in, where the person who got through 9 examples is able to be engaged the whole time and go quickly. The person who did 3 examples is also engaged and going as fast as they can. But I'm not going to give this person a 90% and this person a 30%. And if I did that, it would kind of destroy the whole kind of soft evaluation environment that I think is so conducive to building skills. So anyway, that's how I normally do it in a face-to-face class. When we also do oral exercises, where I'll say, I'd like an example of this construction, and everyone will stand up, and then I just go ahead and point to different people, and they give an example, and I criticize it or not, and then they could sit down. And in that way, everyone's engaged because they have to come up with their own unique example, and they don't get to sit down until they do it. So anyway, that's how I typically run my Latin workshop. And when I discovered that I had to do all this online, or just thinking about it, I was very concerned that that would not be something I could do. So I did figure out how to do it, and that's what I'm going to introduce to you guys and show you guys. But before I do, I need to just kind of walk you through a little bit of a progression of how I get people to the point where I can do a workshop. Because a workshop, if you're saying, I want you guys to just do all of this, you have to flip the classroom where they're learning the principles and seeing examples and learning the basics somewhere else. And that's where this is where I use tools that I built that are on the Pictodicta platform, and I want to quickly just show you how those work. So I'm going to share with you guys a video that just introduces some vocabulary. Actually, before I start this, many of you all who are familiar with classical education are familiar with the progression of grammar, dialectic, and rhetoric, and how Dorothy Sayers kind of connects that to elementary school, middle school, and high school. I think that that progression, people think of it as that kind of macro progression, but oftentimes I think it's more useful to think of it as a micro progression of learning almost any topic. So when you go through learning something, you're going to learn this, what she calls the grammar stage, which is this learning of basic terms, terminology, and basic information. Then you progress to this dialectic where you're learning how to make those things interact at a very basic and objective level. And then you go from there and you progress to a more complicated interacting with more subjective. You add humor and poetry and all of those sorts of things to it. This is a progression that I have my students go through in mini cycles. And because I teach in college, I can get through an entire cycle in 1 week. So what they do is they begin by learning what I would say the grammar side of things, which is they're going to learn a bunch of vocabulary. They're going to learn some principles. That's the grammar part. Then they're going to move to some basic objective exercises in composition. And then they're going to move to more complicated stuff. So through the Pictodicta platform, Vocabulary Builder is designed to teach vocabulary to students on their own so they can flip it. They don't do this in a live class. And I'm going to show you a little video of how this
Maris
works. Okay, so here you'll see they're learning words, they're hearing words, they're seeing pictures of the words, and they're actually going to see a sentence with the word used in context. And from a Latin language point of view, this is hitting that concept from every direction. So they're introduced to this concept. They see definitions, they see translations. They should have a very good idea of what this is just from this introduction. And I'll just go ahead and show you how this goes.
Vita sexti.
We have another one.
Lucrum, vir lucrum facit.
And this is very different from the way vocabulary is normally introduced, because normally you'd say lucrum means profit. And in here, you actually have a sentence where it's used. And you get to see more of a fleshed out definition. And you'd be shocked at how often that really helps students get a much better idea of not only the real meaning of a word, but the
Spes spei. Spes est viro ut ad summum montem perveniat.
So as they're kind of going through a few exercises here, and then
Vita.
afterward you get quizzed. And so what happens is this is what students are all doing on their own on their computers. So they learn a few words and then they're going to get quizzed. This is another kind of soft evaluation that happens outside of class, and they're using these words in context.
Vita sexti. Spes spei.
And as you can see, they go through and are quizzed on everything they've learned. Now, Vocabulary Builder, it goes through all sorts of different activities, and it goes through different directions, and they're hearing things, they're seeing things. But outside of the classroom, they learn all the vocabulary, and there's no need for me inside the classroom to, or even if it's a virtual classroom, to address vocabulary, because they already know it and are good at it by the time they come in. So in a second stage, I'm just going to fast forward here. That's kind of the grammar stage. We also have, I use vocabulary, or I use St. Andy's Latin Companion to teach grammar. And here we actually have videos that are going to explain a grammatical concept and then give a bunch of illustrated examples of how that works in context. And so I'm going to play this for you right now. It's just a few.
Subjunctive is the causal subjunctive, where it is part of a causal clause, that is, offering a reason why. You may make a causal clause using the indicative and the conjunction quod, quia, or quoniam. Flores carpit, quia feminam diligit. He's picking flowers because he loves the woman. You may also use the subjunctive with the conjunction cum to mean the same. Cum diligat.
So this is the part that traditionally would happen in a classroom. You can imagine giving this exact same sort of instruction with a projector, going through a PowerPoint presentation, and then explaining the principles, here are a few examples, and having the students copiously take notes. So with the Pictodicta platform, a lot that can be put all on, it can be automated. Then what you have is students actually go through the exercises, and this would be this dialectic stage where they're required to complete the examples that they've already seen. So this is a very, very small step up from that grammar memory level. Here, they've been given a principle, and you're saying, follow this principle on these examples that you've seen. And so they're going to be required to fill them out. And as you can see here, you're just filling out the very examples that they've learned how to do. And so on. So
Fundus.
This, okay. So this preparation allows me to do workshops at what I would call a rhetoric level. Okay, so they're already doing this grammar memory stuff. They're always doing basic connections. And then as they move to the workshop, I'm able to ask for examples and just say, I'd like you to use this in a sentence. They already know the vocab, they already knew the grammar, and now it's time for me to see if they can do it in such a way that they can make it work for them and they can communicate. What I figured out with some suggestions from Daniel is that we can fake a whiteboard classroom using Google Sheets. And I'm going to show you how that works right now. So using Google Sheets, formatting a spreadsheet like this, so you have a bunch of areas where each student has their own space where they can communicate with the teacher. We've created a template. I've sent it to Daniel, and that is something that if you guys are interested in adopting this kind of classroom, you're welcome to go ahead and get that and just copy it. But students will write their name in here, and then that becomes their area where they're going to communicate. When they give an example, they're just going to type it into this box. Google Sheets will even allow you to take a picture with your phone and paste whatever it is into that box if you do it right. And so you could use a physical whiteboard and have them take pictures. You could have them doing some sort of physical project, say it were a painting class or something else that was hands-on, like a science experiment or something like that. And you could have them take a picture and submit it to the teacher to be seen through one of these boxes. And I like to have these little scores at the top. And this is because I have them go through as many examples as they can in one class period. I tell them, just give yourself a point whenever I've approved whatever it is you've done. And so they will give themselves a tally mark as they go up. Frequently, when I want to have, if you look here at the bottom of this, there's a tab that says quiz. I created kind of a fake blackboard here where I can write the assignments of things that I want them to do. So if I want them to begin, all right, first one, use the word fundus in an example, and then submit it to be checked. And then they'll move on to Vita and Perdita and Denique and so on. When students type in, you won't see what they've written until they actually submit it. And what we discovered through trial and error was if you have them change the color, so they just take a bright color and fill their box with orange. And what that does is that's the equivalent of kind of holding up the whiteboard and saying, hey, I'm done. I'd like you to comment on this. Okay. And anyway, this is the system that has worked for the virtual whiteboard classroom. And what I'm going to do is I'm now going to share with you a short video, a short clip of my own freshman Latin students who are using this system. So this is a live class, and I've just given you a clip. I'm going to go ahead and just...
Margarita. Optime. Imperam. Are you trying to go with future there, Margarita?
No.
What were you trying to go with? Just present?
Yeah, I think that's
So you just remember you don't use the M there, you use the O ending. Okay.
So as they're all submitting their own answers, and you can see some of them here, I have a Zoom session open at the same time. And what I do is just simply call their name out and say, okay, Margarita, is this what you're doing? There's an issue here. You need to fix this. And you're going to see me us going back and forth as they submit things, they change the colors, and then I just make comments over Zoom.
Gratia ei. Ei and oboidirent. Okay, it's going to keep the I. Good job, though.
Now, nobody's submitting one with the color yet, and so they're all working, and they're all engaged.
Let's see, Prisca. Optime. Placet. Margarita. Optime. Placet.
Optime placet, for those of you who aren't Latin teachers, just means fantastic, I love it, move on. And then they're just going on to the next one.
Campane. Bonum exemplum est substantivi, sed verbum est neutrum, non femininum.
And there I'm just giving some correction and suggesting, okay, that word right there is neuter. It's not feminine, so you need to go back and revise it. And he goes back, fixes it, and then resubmits it.
Non femininum. Prisca exemplum placet. Bene. Natania motet. Vocabulum quod quaeris est monet.
So as you can see, I've actually got, I think, 20 people in this classroom. They're all working on coming up with these sentences, and they're submitting, and I'm able to actually keep them all engaged. It's very much the virtual equivalent of the coach walking around and seeing everybody working and making suggestions and corrections. It's a soft grading environment. They can try risky sentences. Many of them are trying difficult things. And if they get it wrong, I'm just going to correct them. But it's not like they're going to miss points that's going to damage their grade long term. And that makes them feel free to just try stuff. And that's how they learn more. Now, to make this work, you actually have to give them assignments that are small enough to fit on a whiteboard. And so you have to be careful about the kinds of things you give them. And it also needs to be something where it's difficult enough, where they have to think about it for a little bit, so that you don't have to interact with 20 different people all at once. If you do have to interact with 20 different people at once, then everyone's waiting for you to be engaged, or waiting for you to answer, and they're not engaged. The whole point of this is to just keep things going. and have them constantly engaged and working and being corrected. All right, so that is the whiteboard. And the kind of the oral workshop, I'm going to, I wasn't able to get any live or record any footage of students actually doing this, but I'll just show you what I've done for that as well.
I'll interject real quick with a question that's relevant to what you're showing.
Okay, sure.
Genho said, can they see whiteboards of other students? Can the students see?
Oh yeah, I'm really glad you asked that. So unfortunately, yes. Using Google Sheets to create this is kind of a hack job to recreate something in that we have in a normal classroom. In the normal classroom, they can't. Now, one of the reasons why this works in my exercises is because I'm asking them to come up with their own unique examples of each word or construction. So it doesn't matter if they're looking at somebody else's. They're not cheating. In fact, it might be helpful if they just want to be like, I need to learn how to do this. And just like in a soccer practice, they might look at somebody else and say, oh, that's how you kick the ball. I'll try that too. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But if you were to say, try to do this for the math class, that would be a problem. Because if you were to say, okay, here are all the problems, and then you just need to work through them, and they're submitting them all, they're going to be able to see everybody else's answer, and that wouldn't work so well. So that could be an issue. Now, as long as there is, it would work, say, for a translation exercise. Say you were to have line numbers in a text that they had to translate. Some of the students would be able to get ahead of others. And what will end up happening is everyone will be somewhere different fairly quickly. And you could also ask them, or you could even do it yourself. You could erase their answer the moment you've given comment on it. So yes, that does present a problem. I think it's something you can work around. I think long term, I hope to see some technology that creates an environment like this where you can only see your own board. Does that answer the question, Daniel?
Yeah, I think it does. There are other questions, but we can save those till later. We will get to them.
Okay.
Unless you want to jump into some of them now.
Yeah, I want to just run through a couple of different kinds of workshop-y things, and quickly give you examples, and then we'll open up and I can explain, answer your questions. Okay, so on this one, I've got a whiteboard here, and I'm using, you can't see it here. I'm going to be using my iPad, and but you could use it you could do this lots of different ways. When you're doing oral workshop skills, the last thing you want is for answers to become long and slow, because then everyone stops becoming engaged, okay? You want things to go quick. And a great way to do that is to give them a template where there's very little that they actually have to change. So today, this morning, I was teaching the Future Perfect to the same group of freshmen. And I gave them the sentence, cum blank Litabor, okay, which, if translated, when blah blah blah, I will be happy. Okay, and what I did was I asked them to fill in the blank with their own word, but they have to use the future perfect. One of the first, and so what happens is they see this whiteboard, they see the sentence, and now I'm just going to very quickly call on people. I use Zoom and have them go into kind of the Brady Bunch view where you can see everybody, whatever you call that, and just ask them to raise their hand.
Gallery view.
What's that?
Gallery view.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
like Brady, I like Brady Bunch View better, but okay.
There we go.
So so they just raise their hand. I call on somebody and they give their answer. Because it's a short, quick template where they're not going to go into something long, it's meaningful, and sometimes they could be hilarious with them. So one of the first answers here was, something like cum profectus domo ero. Somebody says this, I think it's one of the first ones. Meaning basically, once I can get out of my house, I will be happy. And then they all go very quickly. I've got, 10, 15 answers as they're just substituting their own form of the future perfect. Now, again, the reason it works is because they're engaged, because the cycle is so quick that they can answer again very quickly. And there's only one small point that they have to focus on, that use of that future perfect. Okay, so anyway, the whiteboards, virtual whiteboards, and then this system right here are kind of how I've been simulating that in-class workshop, and that's been surprisingly effective. I actually thought it was going to be a lot harder than it was, and I'm finding that not only has that worked really well, but in some ways, it's kind of worked better than, there are some ways in which it's worked better than what happens in the regular classroom. In some ways, you can see more of what's going on and interact faster and show different things quicker. Okay, so before, I want to show you also how we do recitations. At the end of the week, after we do workshopping, we meet in small groups and of about 8. And the students are required to have prepared answers to questions. I ask them questions in Latin, and they're going to have answers to deliver in Latin. They're not allowed to be looking at anything as they do so. Now, we've done that for years. It's part of our regular way of teaching freshman Latin. Now, to do this online, that has not been very difficult. Zoom makes it very easy with the presenter view to just kind of focus on whoever's talking. But you might be wondering, how does this keep engagement up because only one person is talking? The way that that I've done that is twofold. One, I organize my groups around skill level. And so the group that you're about to see are all about at the same level. Again, this is looking to kind of sports as a model here. When you have a basketball program, you put your varsity kids together and your junior varsity kids together. And your junior high kids together. And actually, it would not make them better to mix them, because what happens is they're able to really, someone who's out of their league never gets the ball, okay? They don't get any practice. And so that's one way that has made this effective, is to group them by skill level. Even if they're not grouped by skill level as far as their class is concerned, you can have kind of mini groups within a class, and that's very effective. The second one is group grading, which just sounds like that you're just throwing standards out the window. What is this group grading stuff? Well, what happens is it makes them work as a team, and it makes them invested in what everyone else is saying. So what happens is you give them a grade as a recitation, and you require that they practice as a recitation before they come. And that's what we've done. These students actually met as a group, and they practiced going through all of their stuff together, and then they do it as a performance and they see how they do. So in that way, they're more invested in what everyone else is doing, more engaged than they would be if it were just a seminar type class where everyone shows up and says whatever it is they're going to say. So here I'll just give you a quick glimpse of how that works. Okay, well, incipiamos. Ubi sunt eae naves quae in mare mersae sunt?
Undi
fundi, sed fundus non licet dicere fundi, quia non est oppidum, neque insula, non habet locativum. Now, what happened there was I asked a question, and the first kid kind of actually gave a really lame answer, trying to be really small, and this group doesn't normally do that, and he actually got it wrong. So I gave him an explanation why. That's what I just did. There we go. Ita, in fundo. Right, so then he corrected it.
In fundo ubi pisces in aquam natet.
Okay. And immediately other students are thinking that person is floundering. I need to actually have a new answer to just jump right in, and because our grade depends on it. And so in that way, there's engagement. And we go on for an hour like this. And I'm not going to have you do that. I'm just going to fast forward to here because we're running short on time. Finally, so the group recitation is a third way to kind of do a workshop. So everyone's invested and engaged. Now at the end here, I want to show you a group project. This is a composition project where the students are required to write a small composition. And you'll notice that all the students have written their composition on the same sheet. They all did it on a Google Sheet. And then I'm sharing that with them so they can actually see everybody's. And again, it's a group grade. So what happens is if somebody does amazing and somebody, 3 down does kind of poorly, it actually is going to hurt the grade of all of them. They're allowed to help each other with editing, okay? And so that means that they prepare all their stuff, then they peer review as a small group. And if student A makes a mistake and student B in his group catches it and helps him correct it, then that's great. I never even see it. But what that does is it again increases engagement. Because they're looking out to see, did I miss anything when I look through that person's composition? Because if I did, I don't want to miss it again next time. So here you can see how that's going to work. All right. Elisabetta, Lydia talem annulam nolens, cum eum quem novolum esse putabat furtum confiteria audiret, manum sustulurat, ud donum objeceret. This is fantastic. We've got a nice participial introductory clause here, an accusative infinitive right there with like a relative clause in there. And then we've got the whole thing is a narrativus, and then we've got a pluperfect, and then a finalis. And now, as I'm commenting on this one person's grade, if they were all individually graded, everyone else would just be not paying attention. They wouldn't care because they have no investment in it. By group grading and saying everybody's part of this assignment, everyone's looking and saying, what did he like? Ooh, he liked that clause. Maybe I should do one of those next time. Anyway, and as I run through this, you'll see I grade this one as optime. And I tend to just, optime is fantastic. Sometimes I write bene, good. Sometimes I say nothing. And they really notice when I say nothing and I just pass on. And then at the end, I give a grade. So anyway, those are 4 kinds of what I would say workshop type classes. We're trying to keep everybody working all at once. For me, they have worked way better than I thought they would, moving to an online format. And a lot of that has to do with the flipped classroom stuff that we're doing, where they're learning all this material outside of class. But with Zoom and some other things, it's been effective as well. So I could go ahead and stop there and take on questions. And if there's anything else you guys want to see, I can address that.
So yeah, there's a few questions. There has so Danae Harlow and Tara Lightheart both asked similar questions about workshopping doing the workshopy things, as Tara said, in an asynchronous classroom. And Danae was saying we are not doing live online classes at Logos. We can post videos of ourselves and give homework. How can I give soft evaluations without the work being graded? Because we aren't live, I can't do the simple oral written sentences on whiteboards like I usually do.
Yeah. Well, at the risk of sounding negative, how could you ever teach a successful sports program without actually having live practices? You know, how many really great basketball players learn by videos that were asynchronous? And maybe that's not completely a legitimate analogy there, because with basketball you literally can't play unless you have more than one person. But I think that the not having live feedback removes your ability to exhort in real time, which I think is the most valuable thing, that exhort and correct in real time, which I think is one of the most valuable things that a teacher does. So for me, it's really hard to give a good answer to that. I don't know how you would do that. Maybe some sort of if you had some sort of forum where people are posting things, and then kind of you come back later and you're like, oh, that's really fantastic, and you kind of make a remark on those, almost like a social media sort of thing. You might be able to get something like that to go. I think ultimately that's not a good long-term solution. I think you need synchronous in order to keep things going. Now, just trying to survive for a couple months, I think maybe a forum and figuring out something where people can comment on other people's submissions, that might be good. Daniel, do you have any ideas on that? You might be asynchronous is not my deal.
Yeah. Well, how would you see Pictodicta fitting into that?
Yeah, I knew you were going to come back with that. I see Pictodicta as preparation for synchronous. I mean, that's one of the major differences. I don't like the idea of education in a can. I think that Pictodicta is like a pitching machine, where you've got a coach who's coaching, and then you've got a pitching machine that is working students players in a very particular way, where the coach couldn't do it himself.
Right. So Jen Ho's actually had a suggestion. So would you suggest live office hours for the teacher outside of regular office hours, which is basically getting some kind of synchronous teaching? I think that's what I'm hearing from you, is that to really, you can do a lot of preparation, you can do a lot of work, but to really make use of the teaching, it needs to be synchronous. So maybe that can be off hours extra.
Yeah, I might be really biased in this way. So just take it with a grain of salt, but I really believe in the synchronous, and particularly with office hours. Have you all ever noticed how much time does teachers spend writing comments on papers, but they don't read them? You know, if you wrote just with red ink all over this paper, I mean, maybe there are a few students that read them. Tara Lightheart probably read them, but a lot of people don't. And yet, if you actually have a 2-minute conversation with somebody about that, they take it more seriously, and they're more likely to learn from it. And of course, like I said, this is, I'm biased. But I actually feel like if I give live feedback, it takes me less time than to write out all of these careful notes and then have students may read them or not. So I almost think that if you set a live office hours where you had 2 minutes to talk to every student, and it was very focused, I think that would be more profitable than you spending an hour just writing copious notes to email back to them, at least for a lot of students.
Yeah. Jen also had a question. Do you ever have problems with a student who really doesn't give 100% effort on these group grading assignments?
So no, because peer pressure is really brutal. And I know it sounds terrible, but it really works. Uh, they really want to do well, and sometimes they will come and come to me and say, I'd like you to put me in another recitation because I don't think I could keep up with this one. And sometimes I do it, but it's normally being placed in a different group rather than them just dragging their feet.
Okay. So there were some a question from Carolyn. She said, with the Google Docs, I think you are saying that you have that open at the same time as Zoom. Is that correct? Might that get confusing for younger students? I teach grades 1 through 6.
I think that grades 4 through 6 can probably handle that. I think grades 1 through 3 can barely even handle typing on a keyboard in many cases. And so that might be difficult. For those, I would actually have you just use physical whiteboards and hold them up to the camera. Now, the reason I think that could work with those grades is because they might only be writing one word. If they're only writing one word or two words, you could have them hold up the whiteboards and make it work. With my classes, they have a sentence that might be 25 words long and fairly complicated, and that doesn't really work well on physical boards and holding them up to the camera. So I would encourage you to use something very simple for younger. And as far as where that difference is, you'd have to experiment to find out. But my guess is somewhere between third or fourth grade.
And so another question from Carolyn, she said, would IEW writing videos fit into the same category as Pictodicta videos you referred to?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things like that. Pictodicta, again, does that kind of grammar and dialectic. And I think that there's a lot of stuff out there that does grammar in the sense of watching a video that just orients them to the terminology or the concepts. That's what I'm talking about. I think Old Western culture in a certain kind of humanities class would meet that need. I think that in IEW stuff, I love his material. I think that definitely meets that. And I think that in that case, you'd have to do the dialectic stuff as written work that unfortunately has to be graded by the teacher or parent. I'm not sure how you would do that. But that step, I don't think you could have them do on their own. Pictodicta is interactive, and so it's allowing you to take you through those objective examples. But I do think that it would be like the grammar version of it.
To go back a little bit to the asynchronous classrooms and to partially answer, I very much agree. You need synchronous teaching. So with Old Western culture, with Pictodicta, with IEW videos, all of these are preparation for that rhetoric stage, you might say, for interacting. And so the homeschool answer, what we're predominantly geared towards homeschoolers at Roman Roads and as well as Kepler. And these days, everyone's homeschoolers, right? So I think I can say this. But what our answer is we don't encourage you to use these as a here you go. I want to grade out, plug and play. These are meant. We really encourage parents with like the Old Western culture to watch them with their kids, and then whether it's a co-op or your siblings or presenting at the dinner table, you need that to really learn it. The workbooks are ideally used as a group setting. So the videos are just preparation for that synchronous teaching, which needs to happen in one way or another. So I know how to talk to people about how to do that in a home setting or a co-op setting to get some of that synchronous teaching that's so necessary for it not to just be a data dump where the real learning happens. And that's where Pictodicta falls in. So there are a lot of ideas. So kids who are in a traditional school, who their parents may not be prepared or ready or equipped for this, and so that's kind of the hard thing that's going on now. But I don't know if you have. I guess the question is this: do you have? Do you see parents even last minute like this playing a role with perhaps helping with that synchronous teaching?
I think that if for whatever reason synchronous teaching is not an option, I think someone's got to do it. If I would say 5% of the student population are autodidacts. If you give them a book or a video, if you give them a book, maybe 5%. You give them a video, maybe 7.5%. Okay. You give them something like Pictodicta that's also got exercises. Okay. Maybe 10, 15%. Could completely, without any sort of guidance or exhortation or anything like that, thrive and really, really grow and take it to, just learn to love it, which is what our goal is, and be formed by it. I think it's very rare. So yeah, I think that parents are going to have to step in to provide that. Kind of back to what you were saying about the role of some of these things. One way to look at it is this. I think that automation is not to replace the human element. Automation allows us to actually focus on the quality of the human element. And so you can see in the workshops that we were doing, they're all rhetoric level. They know what they're doing. They are already oriented. We hit the ground running. I don't even introduce stuff. They just jump in. And I think that videos, books, apps, all of those things can be used to focus that time. But without that time, I just don't know how I don't know how I do it.
Yeah. Slightly different question here. Joseph Roberts asks, what are some ways you recommend translating the online work students do to a grade?
Yeah. So there's a reason I'm a huge fan of soft grading. Like I said, it allows me to get students engaged and working without actually being so buried myself under evaluation that I am tempted to lighten up on the students, if that makes sense. Okay, I can actually keep them going without actually evaluating. So I would say evaluate less often. Okay, you need to evaluate less often. And most of the time it needs to be soft. Those moments where it is formal grading, where it's for a grade, this is a skill-based class, and that's what I'm talking about. So find an assignment that you can grade. I think it's easy to give people a take-home test. People were doing that before the plague hit us, and so we could do it after. I think that oral exams at New St. Andrews, I usually give 5-minute long oral exams. I could easily do that through Zoom just as well as I normally could. And I have maybe one question or one kind of like essay type question. And I will say, here's your question. Let's see how you do. And I give an evaluation there. So I think between exams, oral exams, or some take-home assignments, you can do those. But I just say lighten up on those, or otherwise you're going to bury yourself.
So I think we have time for one more question here. Can you tell me more about talking through a text? How do you do that? Maybe the mechanics of that.
Sure. So let me go ahead and just show you my whiteboard here. Okay. So
this is your iPad, right?
Yeah, this is my iPad.
And for those who don't know, you can easily share your iPad or even iPhone via AirPlay or Cord to Zoom. It becomes a shared link. Like you'd share a screen, you can actually share the iPad. So
yeah. So what I've done here is I've taken photographs with my iPad of the textbook that we're using, and then I put them into a slide program where I can write on it with my pen, or my Apple Pencil. So what I'm doing here is I'm just going to, I could say, I'm talking through the text in English or Latin, and I say, okay, what is this ending here? Everybody's looking at the screen. They're seeing exactly what's going on. For our sophomore classes where we do a lot of spoken Latin, we just talk in Latin and we're looking at the text. And it's been great. In fact, it's been maybe a little better than usual because we're all looking at the same text, and
Heard
I
that
can draw
before.
pictures much more easily. And then I'll make margin notes where I might say something like, if I want to say, oh, okay, Palisper equals Paulum temporis or something like that. And just being able to have us all share the notes. When I go back to a physical classroom, I think I'm going to be doing this on the whiteboard. I mean, with a projector, because it's been so nice talking through the text that way.
That looks great. Okay. Well, thank you. Anything you wanted to add, Tim, or we're just about out of time. So you want to share closing thoughts for all these teachers?
Yeah. So I mean, I hope that's profitable. I think a lot of the things that I've shown you there are for kind of a very high level of Latin, but I think that many of them can be translated into younger age groups, and yeah, I hope it's profitable. I think a lot of this could be used in a number of different classes, whether humanities or language skills. And students really love to write their own examples. And so if you can figure out a way to let them do that, they're really engaged. And if they're engaged, they're going to learn more. So.
Okay, well, thank you, Tim. And there will be a recording of this available if you know a teacher who would benefit from it. And the sheets file that you created, you were saying that you'd make that available to people?
Yeah, I sent that to you. And I think, I don't know what the best way is to get that out.
Contact me.
Yeah.
I'll get it to you. Very good. Well, thank you so much for coming, everyone, and thanks, Tim, so much for doing this.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day.
Bye.